Hello, Mr. Caleb Maupin, and thank you very much indeed for joining us in this program.
Glad to be here, as always.
Some 200 tons of toxic chemicals have been delivered to the UK from Syria after the battle-torn country agreed to the destruction of its stockpile last year. Mr. Maupin, how could it be guaranteed that these chemicals would really be destroyed in the United Kingdom?
Well, we absolutely have no way of guaranteeing that. We know that the governments of Britain and the United States have a record of being dishonest and hiding key facts from the public. And we also know that the corporation, which has been assigned and contracted the task of destroying Syria's chemical weapons, is Veolia. And Veolia is a corporation with a record of being dishonest and fraudulent and problematic internationally. Veolia Transportation or Veolia Environmental, it's a firm based in France that has been contracted by the UN to destroy Syria's chemical weapons. And it has a long record of poisoning drinking water in places like Kentucky and the United States, in different parts of the world. And it is also very opposed to labor unions, has a record of attacking labor unions. For example, in Boston right now, the school bus drivers are fighting against this corporation, which is trying to take away their right to form unions, and has actually filed a false police reports against leaders of the labor union in Boston. So all the players involved are people that we know have a record of dishonesty. So that's a very frightening situation for the people of Britain right now, to know that there are chemical weapons in their country that are being handled by people who are dishonest and have a record of fraud.
The B-type chemicals are industrial-grade chemicals, and they become highly toxic when mixed with an A precursor to make a nerve agent. Mr. Maupin, bearing in mind some Western countries' support of the ISIL terrorists in Iraq and Syria, is there any possibility that Britain delivers these chemicals to ISIL to be used against the people of Iraq and Syria?
Well, that's certainly a concern, because while the Syrian government has, very willingly handed over its chemical weapons, made clear it has no desire to use them and no intention of using them, never did use them and has no intention of ever using them in the future, and was happy to turn them over, the Syrian insurgents, the terrorist groups that are tearing up Syria right now, which are receiving support from the United States, Britain, Saudi Arabia, and other countries, they are using chemical weapons. And Carla Del Ponte from the United Nations has confirmed that the Syrian terrorists, most of them aren't even Syrian, but the terrorists in Syria are using chemical weapons and have used sarin nerve gas, have used chemical weapons. So these terrorists being backed by the West are using chemical weapons. So again, are we really to trust Britain and the United States to destroy these chemical weapons? The question now comes up when they are supporting groups that are using chemical weapons. So the whole thing is very problematic, and it's a serious cause for concern. There is so much of an uproar about Syria possibly having chemical weapons or possibly using them. Yet, everyone knows that the insurgents backed by the United States, Britain, Saudi Arabia, everyone knows that they're using chemical weapons, and yet nothing is being done about that.
And the OPCW, the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, is in charge of this issue, overseeing this issue in let's say, chemical weapons in Syria and destroying it. Don't you think that it was, maybe it could be to disarm? The objective behind this issue could be to disarm Syria in order to, have better access to Syria in future attacks?
Yes, well, that's been a concern. Weapons inspectors are proven in Iraq and other places to be cooperating with foreign intelligence services. And while they're, allegedly looking for weapons, they engage in espionage. And they do things on behalf of Western governments in the countries that are under attack. That's been proven. And also, as much as the U.S. leaders say that they are opposed to weapons and such, if you look at the record, Libya destroyed their chemical weapons, but did that stop the U.S. from bombing and destroying Libya back with NATO and supporting insurgents in Libya? Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. Now, they said that they had it, but it was proven that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. But again, that didn't prevent the U.S. from bombing and destroying Iraq. And if you look at this pattern, a country disarming and getting rid of its chemical weapons in no way deters the United States from attacking and destroying them. Some would even argue it makes them more vulnerable. I don't know what the case is, but the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has made statements in the past essentially saying that the reason that they continue to develop nuclear weapons is because they feel that halting their nuclear program would make them more vulnerable. The policy of the United States right now, the aggression the United States is engaging in, is endangering everyone. It is the primary source of danger to humanity, of the escalation of weapons, of conflicts around the world, and no one is going to be safe as long as Israel, the United States, and Britain and other imperialist countries are threatening the world. No one will be safe. There will not be peace on earth as long as they are threatening the world. And the horrific things like chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, are going to continue to be a reality in international geopolitics because of that.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us in this program, Mr. Caleb Maupin.
I'm glad to be here as always.